Coming up on this episode of Booked on Rock, author Chris Epting. He's written books with Phil Collen of Def Leppard, John Oates, Tom Johnston and Pat Simmons of the Doobie Brothers, Dave Mason. He's traveled to some of the most legendary sites in rock history, including the site of the Buddy Holly plane crash, the site of James Dean's fatal car crash. And if you're a fan of Paul Rodgers, Chris has some major news to share with you. All that coming up next.
I'm a writer. I know dialogue.
That's a fountain of conversation, man. That's a geyser.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yes, provocative.
Oh, Daddy, stand back, man. Woo! Rock and roll!
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. I'm Eric Senich. We are back with another chapter in the dialogue series. It's a chill and chat with authors, fellow podcasters, musicians, and more. And our guest is author, TV host, photographer, Chris Epting. He's the author of over 40 books, including James Dean Died Here, Roadside Baseball, Hello, It's Me, Dispatches from a Pop Culture Junkie, Led Zeppelin Crashed Here, The Rock and Roll Landmarks of North America, and many others. He's also co-written. Bear with me here. This is a long intro, Chris. Bear with me. You got quite a list of credentials. He's co-written several memoirs, including Adrenalized with Def Leppard's Phil Collen, Change of Seasons with John Oates, Long Train Running with Tom Johnston and Pat Simmons of the Doobie Brothers, Only You Know and I Know with Dave Mason, Son of a Milkman, My Crazy Life with Tesla bassist Brian Wheat, and Idle Truth with Leif Garrett. Chris was also the co-host and executive producer of the Reels TV series It Happened Here. Chris, welcome to the podcast. Did I cover them all?
I think you did a very generous job. I'm humbled, and thank you very much for
Oh, this is so cool to have you on. You have so many stories. Before we get to the stories, let's talk about where you're from, what led you on the path to your career. And I'm also curious to hear about the story you ran into Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, when I was a kid. Well, I grew up in New York. I've lived in California since the mid-80s, but I grew up in New York, north of New York City. A huge music fan from the get-go. I will tell you, I have a very heavy bias toward the Rolling Stones, who, from the time I was about 6 or 7 years old, something just happened. I heard "Get Off My Cloud." It was the first song I remember on the radio, and from there was no turning back. And I am an absolute Stones devotee. Always have been, always will be. And that my first concert was June 22nd, 1975, 12 years old, Madison Square Garden, night one of the Stones six night stand. But from there, I always loved rock and roll. Like a lot of us of that generation, pre-MTV, there were, if you lived in a close to a fairly major city, you could see anybody and everybody. And I would, from things like the Stones and Zeppelin at the Garden in the mid to late 70s, I discovered bands like the Ramones and Blondie and Patti Smith and Talking Heads and television, down places like CBGB and Max's Kansas City. So I was kind of had both of those worlds, the smaller kind of thing that was about to explode, and then the major artists. And from there, I went to college. I got out. I wrote and directed commercials for a bunch of years. But always kind of wrote freelance and photographed freelance. And then in my late 30s, kind of shifted gears, started writing books and becoming a music journalist, which kind of opened me up into this whole other world where I could get to know a lot of these people, write about them, photograph them, and help them tell their stories.
Who was your first big get for an interview?
In life?
Yeah, musician, actor.
When I was, I think I was a freshman or sophomore in high school. And we had an assignment where you had to interview anybody from your life. And, most people would be like, they might talk to one of their parents or the carpenter, somebody in their little circle. And I had a different thought. And I knew, I had just read in the paper that Fred Gwynn, who was Herman Munster in the Munsters, lived by us. And I said to my teacher, if I could talk to him, would that be okay? And they said, great, yeah, of course. And whoever interests you. So I looked him up in the phone book and I called him, and that voice answered the phone. And I explained what I was doing. He goes, sure, come on over. Great. And so my mom brought me over and dropped me off there. And there I was in the home of Fred Gwynn. And he was amazing. And he was really friendly and nice. But the issue with him is he cursed a lot, not of anger. It was just the way he spoke. So I had this tape. I've got it somewhere. I've got a TDK tape somewhere of him laughing and telling stories, but every word is F this, F that. And I didn't know what to. I went to a Catholic high school, and I said to my teacher, is this okay? And he said, well, you can blot it out, don't put the words in, but let us know the accuracy of the conversation. And so that was my first real moment. You mentioned Hitchcock. Our first trip to California in about 1974. My folks were my dad had a business trip in LA, and we all it was a vacation for us as well. And checking into the hotel, my parents were checking in. My sisters and I were running around the lobby of the Century Plaza Hotel. I wasn't looking where I was going, and I ran flush into an adult stomach. And I remember thinking that there's adults that are cool with that and let it go, and then there's this guy that's going to make a thing out of it. And I recognized him as Alfred Hitchcock because I had just seen him on television about a week before on PBS giving an interview. And it's weird. That sounds strange, but it was the only time he had a mustache. It was
Oh,
like in this
wow.
few week, and I recognized that. And he took me by the back of my head and he marched me over to my parents who were like did a double take as they saw us coming. And he made this little speech about kids in public behaving properly. But then as he walked away, he kind of tousled my hair and he lightened it a little bit. So
That's so good. I don't think there's any photos of him with a mustache.
I think I found one years later. It was kind of a mustache, but again, this PBS interview, he had that, and he must have shot it right around this time because the face was so recognizable.
That is so cool, man.
So yeah, but Fred Gwynn was the first one, and then as I got into music journalism, I don't know who the fr I mean, I was lucky. I got to talk to a lot of people because I wrote for fairly big outlets, so I could I could make a pitch to somebody, and it was usually approved. So that opened up all kinds of doors. I mean, I remember, certain people, sitting down and talking to Jackson Brown a couple of times was a big deal for me as a huge Jackson Brown fan. There's people like that I was a fan of, but I also respected what they did. And so I enjoyed being able to help tell their story. And then when it happened with Phil Collen, that was a little different because I had never written a book with anybody. And I had written about Phil quite a bit. We had developed a friendship. We were driving down to San Diego, I think to a show. And I mentioned it in the car and I said, hey, you ever think about maybe doing your book? Because I was thinking about, as a writer, what's next? What are the opportunities? Because, you always have to, you're freelance. So you're always looking for things. And I had read some great music memoirs and I wondered about that process. And Phil said, yeah, let's give it a shot. So we did. And I just fell in love with that process. Having the trust that built up with Phil was really cool and made me appreciate that process. And I thought, you know what, I want to think of more of these to do, and that really set me off. I think I've done 8 or 9 of those.
I picked the books that I wanted to ask you about, just starting with, I don't know if I think I went with the most recent and then we go backwards, but whatever. We'll get to all of them. Well, let's start with the 2022 book, Long Train Running, Our Story of the Doobie Brothers by Pat Simmons and Tom Johnston. Talk about what the guys had to say about the band contemplating the end of the road. They were only 7 years into their career, and they were at this point where it was going to be over. But things changed, as we know. They were able to get Michael McDonald in. So
It's one of the great, I mean, really, that story I thought was so undertold. I had met Pat first. I was writing an article about Pat's wife, Chris, who's a motorcycle enthusiast, and they had pitched me, I think it was for AOL or the LA Times or something, and she was in this cross country race where they ride antique Harley, like an amazing story. And I went down and met her, and Pat was there, and we were all talking, and they invited me to dinner that night. And over dinner, Pat was telling stories, and I'm like, dude, I mean, and Chris says, I've always told him he should write a book. So that at least opened a door. And then we would chat about it. And then I wrote John Oates' book with him, and he and I were doing a book event in San Francisco. And Tom Johnston's wife was there. The wives get everything done. I have learned that. You want something done, you deal with the wives.
yeah,
And Tom's wife was lovely. We talked to me after and said, wow, I liked how you talked with John. And I think Tom, might be a good thing. And then I thought, well, they could each do individual books, but how cool would it could be to have? I had just read a book by Anne and Nancy Wilson, their memoir, and they deftly intertwined both voices. I hadn't seen that done before. I loved that device, and I thought this would be a good opportunity for that. And so we got that together. And and talking about the part you brought up is a tough part of the band because Tom can't play for a while. And of course, Jeff Skunk Baxter's like, we had this background vocalist in Steely Dan. He's okay. He's not gonna replace Tom, but we can maybe continue the tour if we all split vocals. If he sings a little, plays a little piano, I think we can, because Pat was gonna collapse. They were like 3 shows into this tour when Tom had the medical issue. And that, of course, is Michael McDonald who comes in and they do this tour, and it's like, this guy's pretty good. And Tom comes back for a little bit, and they have, I think, 1 tour together, and then Tom goes off on his own. And of course, the rest is history. Michael's in there for a long time. But then in the 80s, the band comes back with Tom and Pat at the helm. And now they're all together. I think to me, in the back of that book, I write an essay about how underappreciated I think the Doobie Brothers are.
Sure.
When you think about original members being in a band, of what they've done, of how they've started, and what they've been through. And, I think they're incredible. I really think when you talk about great American bands, for me, whether it's the Eagles, the Dead, Kiss, Metallica, whomever, you have to, for me, put the Doobie Brothers in that mix. They're substantial for what they've done and what they continue to do. They just released a great new record, and it's like, how many legacy artists at that level are doing that? Well, they're doing it.
I haven't heard it. I haven't heard that. I don't think I've heard that anything off that album, but I did watch on YouTube a recent concert that they had. This was maybe 2-3 years ago. They're just so tight, just amazing on stage.
The show they put on, no pre-recorded anything. That is as real a rock and roll show as you're going to get, that celebrates every form of American music and then some. And again, when you write a book with people like that, one of the really fun parts is you get to see them play all the time, because oftentimes you're doing some work on the road. You're just sort of absorbing, getting into that circle and immersing yourself in that world, which as a writer, for me, that's something I rely on to really get a sense of what that world is like. And selfishly, I want to see all the shows too.
Oh yeah, I don't blame you. You keep in touch with all these guys? I know obviously Phil Collen, you're a friend with.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm going to see Pat. I'm leaving tomorrow to visit family in New Hampshire. I'll see Pat. I don't know when this is airing, but in a week from right now, I'll see Pat. No, I heard the new record a number of months ago. I was on Maui visiting Dave Mason and went to Pat's house, and he played us the album. No, I don't believe you can go through that kind of writing process if it produces a good book and not be friends for life, because what you go through writing it, I mean, it can be heavy. You're sharing things in many cases you've never shared before. So there's a bond that develops of trust that goes beyond a book. You become good friends. And yeah, I'm proud that most of the books I've written, they're brothers. I mean, they're family, and that's how I hope it'll always be.
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Let's talk about the Dave Mason book. Only you know and I know.
Last week up in Nevada. I mean, again, these are relationships that you visit like you visit family. And yeah, Dave's book. But see, with Dave's is funny, because this is where I began learning that if you do well on someone's behalf, like the Simmons, they called me one night, and Pat and Chris said, we had dinner with Dave Mason. They're good friends at that point on Maui. And the subject of the book came up, and we told them about you. Would you talk to Dave Mason? And I said, like, are you kidding me? Like, I grew up a huge Dave Mason fan. Again, to me, he's another unsung person in the rock family tree when you really look at his story. And so I met Dave, and then the same thing happened.
Feeling All Right is a song that will be forever, that will outlive all of us. Everybody knows that song. But not just that. I mean, he's on all these recordings by the Spencer Davis Group, Give Me Some Love, and George Harrison's All Things Must Pass album. He's on there. The Stone Street Fighting Man. Yeah. All Along the Watchtower. Hendrix.
What the Man Said with Paul McCartney.
Yep. Co-founder of the band Traffic. He's got some untold tales in this book.
He does. And to that end, his book was really fun to write. He
had a complicated relationship with Steve Winwood.
That's being polite. Yes. Very complicated. And that's all in the book. I mean, but as the strangest thing happened when I was in high school in the 70s, I went to see Dave Mason. There was a girl I was trying to take out who was a Dave Mason freak. I was, I think, a junior in high school. And Dave every year would play. There was a very famous music festival in New York City at the Woolman skating rink. It was the Schaefer Festival, the Dr. Pepper Festival, and Dave played it every year. Everybody played it. It was the greatest festival. $4 for orchestra, $2 for balcony, outside under the stars. So we go see Dave Mason, Pablo Cruz open. It was a great kind of early yacht rock sort of show in '78. We're right up front, and that was a great memory. So I'm at Dave's house. We're going through boxes looking for pictures for the book. And I find an envelope that says CP 78. I'm thinking, can that be Central Park 78? The pictures are taken from backstage looking out, and I find myself and Kathy in the third row. I said to Dave, that's me and my
Oh, that's
date,
so cool.
1978. So sometimes these circles complete in ways that you can't even see coming. It's really something.
What was his issue with Steve Winwood? Was it over money, creative decisions?
I mean, my opinion and the way he speaks it in the book, and my take on it is that when Traffic started, you had Chris Wood, Steve Winwood, and Jim Capaldi and Dave. Those were the four, and they went off to a cottage where they kind of cut off from society and made the album. No electricity, like they didn't get a generator, and worked on it out there. And I think right out of the gate, Dave's songwriting disciplines and styles were a little more commercial. Those guys want to just kind of evolve and see where it went. Dave did too, but Dave wrote this song called "Hole in My Shoe," which became a hit while they're making the album. And everybody seemed to resent that in the band, saying, well, that's not the sound we want, this kind of poppy. And Dave's like, well, we shouldn't have a sound. Anything should be. And they were like, well, yeah, anything but that. And Dave was like, well, wait a minute. I know some friction started there. And there may have been, I mean, look, Winwood at that point is a huge star when Traffic starts. The other three guys, no one's heard of, essentially. And I'm not sure, again, this is in my opinion. I've never spoken to Steve Winwood about it, so I would never want to represent his view. But if you look at the activity and listen to Dave's part of it, I think there may have been some sense of kind of threat that this guy can write big songs, and maybe that would have created a challenge for any kind of band leadership, perhaps. I don't know.
Could be.
Look, Steve Winwood's a genius. I'm not going to read into his things because I'm a Steve Winwood fan. But I think there were other things as well that led to it. And also Dave left the band. I mean, after, I don't even know if the first album was out yet, but he left. He felt too much pressure. He's like 19 years old. He has this brutal breakup with a girl. He goes to a Greek Isle, and that's where he writes "Feeling All Right."
Yeah.
And
Wow.
then coincidentally, he's in New York a few months later. He runs into the guys in Traffic making the second album. They kind of make up, and that's on the second Traffic album. But then the book opens with this incredibly dramatic scene, which is kind of like, I don't know, it's like out of The Sopranos, where Dave is invited to a band meeting, which is really kind of a hit because he goes in there, they're all on one side of the room, Dave's on the other, and they fire him from the band. And he's like, he thought they were going to be discussing a new tour or something. And that's how that went down. So it's like I said, I think it's a really interesting book with a lot of cool stories like that.
What did he have to say about "We Just Disagree"?
Well, he didn't write that. That was a guy named Jim Krieger, who was his guitar player, who's since passed away, amazing singer guitar player, who brought Dave that song. And Dave said, I mean, Dave I thought was great because he was open to that from another bandmate because he thought it was a good song. So that's actually Krieger's song, and it's Dave's biggest hit. You can hear Krieger singing background on it. And so Dave's written a lot of amazing songs. Only You Know and I Know, Let It Flow. But We Just Disagree. I mean, Feeling All Right, but We Just Disagree was actually written by his bandmate.
Now, one more question about Dave Mason before we move on to the next one. But he did play in Fleetwood Mac, and I believe that was early 90s. Wasn't that right before?
Early 90s, yeah.
That's right before they reunited with that famous lineup.
Well, and to hear the story about it, it was, Dave got brought in.
Not a lot of people know about that.
No, and it actually, they released an album. It was Christine McVie, John McVie, Mick Fleetwood, Becca Bramlett, Bonnie Bramlett's daughter.
Right.
And Dave. And, what's interesting about it, Dave would play some of his songs at the show. They weren't packing arenas like Fleetwood Mac, but they did tour with Crosby, Stills and Nash. They did play a lot of shows and they toured a lot.
Yeah, I remember they played at Toad's Place in New Haven, which is a small club, 2,000-3,000 people. Yeah.
And I think what happened is that ended up inspiring Lindsay and Stevie to kind of come back. I think having it out there in some way, it became a pathway to the dance, the famous reunion in the early 90s. So it did serve kind of a weird purpose in helping to spark the reunion of the band. But Dave loved that. He and Mick Fleetwood are great friends. Mick, I spoke to him for the book. Mick wrote a really nice piece for the book. And they go back to late 60s with Traffic and early Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green and all that. But yeah, Dave did was a member of Fleetwood Mac.
That's cool. Tesla, one of my favorite bands to come out of the 80s. You co-authored the 2020 book with bassist Brian Wheat titled Son of a Milkman, My Crazy Life with Tesla. And he lived the sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle to the hilt, but it came at a cost. That took years for him to repair. Tell us about that. He really opens up in this book.
Whenever you write a book with somebody, for me anyhow, I like to find, like, I always say, if someone's really well known, my first speech to them was always, let's write a book as if nobody knows who you are. Let's take that point of view and really explain things and share things almost like it's a fictional tale, because most rock star lives do read like fiction. My point is always the fans will always get the book, but what about people that don't know about you? What can we share that's going to pull in people that just like a good story that maybe you've never listened to Tesla? And with Brian, what I'm very happy he was open to was sharing health issues that came up and things like shaming and being overweight and having anxiety, things you don't normally associate with that lifestyle. To Brian, it was important to put that in the book, especially to let other people know they're not alone. And that made his memoir, I think, very different from other ones, and that there was this human element of very non-rock star related traits and stories.
He was out when he was promoting the book. He had a story, I believe it's in the book. I'm a huge Van Halen fan. So the story was that David Lee Roth was going to manage Tesla. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I have to look at the book, but yes, that's absolutely true. He was involved, loved them. And it was almost like the way Gene Simmons first got involved with Van Halen. Like you see a band that you think is gonna, I don't know what happened to reroute that, but no, he was absolutely there and present. There were a lot of people early on that really loved Tesla. I mean, Def Leppard took them out on the Hysteria tour, and they were almost like the baby band for Def Leppard back then, because Def Leppard loved them. Phil Collen wound up producing some Tesla later on. But yeah, Brian also had a really good memory for stories. That's not always the case. In some cases, you've got to do a lot of interviews to substantiate things or fill in some holes. But Brian was really sharp with those stories, and that was a fun, slightly easier book to write as a result.
Leif Garrett, his story is pretty well known. I mean, this is a guy who's survived a lot, a teen idol on top of the world. Drugs led him down a dark path. What can you share from this book from 2019? You co-authored with him. It's called Idle Truth.
Yeah, I could probably write a book about writing that book.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things
How did that come about, by the way? How'd you team up with him?
I'll tell you, there's actually a story behind it. When I was growing up in the 70s, I wasn't a Teen Idol fan. I mean, I was in the late 70s into the Rolling Stones and the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, but I was aware of who Leif Garrett was. How could you not have been? He was the heir apparent to Sean Cassidy. And I was at a party I must have been a senior in high school. And this girl and I were sitting on a couch watching the TV. And that was the night that the Leif Garrett Variety special was on. He was the youngest network star to ever have his own variety. It was, and talking about like times changing, it was Bob Hope, Flip Wilson, Leif, Brooke Shields, Marie Osmond, real pop culture stuff. And we're watching the show almost ironically, like it's a spoof. But I remember saying the girl I was talking to, it's almost like he gets the joke. I think he seems actually pretty cool. Like he knows this is all fake. He had a real kind of innate sense that struck me. And then I learned we're basically the exact same age. And then all through life in the 80s and 90s, when he would pop up in the news infamously for like a drug arrest or an accident or something, I always looked at him and I thought, like, what happened? Like when you're the same age, you've gone through, like I have a twin sister. We go through things at the exact same pace. And I kind of felt that with Leif. And I felt bad whenever I would see him. I thought, there's a story here, many stories here. And then in the it was around 2000 or so, VH1 did that Behind the Music episode which was like, I mean, everybody, I think it was the highest rated episode. It was Leif
Mind
Garrett.
blowing. Yeah, yeah. He meets up with the friend of his that was in a wheelchair because
And
if
that
for those
that
who may not know that story, talk
well,
about
at
that.
when Leif was completely at the apex of his fame, he was driving his Porsche. A buddy was in the car. He rolled the Porsche down, and his buddy was permanently paralyzed. He died just a few years ago.
Oh, I didn't know that. And he was a dancer,
He
right?
died while we were writing the book, in fact.
Oh
I
man.
told Leif that he died.
He was a dancer, right? That was he wanted a career.
Yeah, and they weren't actually really good friends. We lay out in the
Or was
book.
it,
They were
I don't know if
kind
it
of,
was he a biker, a dancer, a skateboarder? It was something.
he was a dancer and just sort of like LA had a lot of these people. They'd all hang out at, there was a place called Flippers. It was like a roller disco place on La Cienega Boulevard. And so anyway, so I saw that episode about Leif, and I hadn't thought about Leif in forever, but it really struck me because again, we're the same age, and at that point, I'm married, I have a couple of kids, I have a life, and I'm looking, thinking, what's happened to this guy? So I want to say, after I've written a few of these co-written memoirs, I thought, what the hell? You know what? I hope Leif is telling his story. I found out who his publicist was, and I wrote her this letter about if he ever wanted to write his story, an approach that I think would be effective to take. And I laid out a whole thing, just cold call. I had never done that. I had never, any book I'd written at that point developed out of a personal relationship. I had never cold called anybody, essentially. And she wrote me back a nice note and said, you know what? He doesn't really want to write a book, but we liked your note. Like it really was touching and thoughtful, and we appreciate that. And that was that. Maybe couple 3 years later, she writes me back and she says, you know what? I don't know if you remember us, but I'm Leif's person and he wants to write a book and we never let go of this letter. And Leif's been approached by a lot of people, but he'd like to talk to you. And he hasn't talked to anybody about doing this. So I go up into the mountains overlooking Malibu, up into Topanga Canyon, and it's an end of the road, like, I mean, no GPS, no nothing, you know? And it's this literally the end of the road. There's a trail that starts there off into the woods. And that was the first day I met Leif. And we bonded that day. He made me breakfast and we just started talking about our favorite albums in the 70s. And we were just like instant best friends. And he's like, would you please write my book with me? And I said, dude, we're going to do this, and thus led into this couple of 2 or 3 year process that had lots of ups and downs. I'm very proud of that book. I think that book tells a very gritty and raw story, but it wasn't easy. And like I said, there's a story within this story that I may write about at some point. It's tough when you work with somebody. You sign what's called a collaboration agreement that protects certain privacies, and I've never ever gone against that. You know what I mean? People are entitled to their own business and privacy, but it was tumultuous. It was there were a lot of great moments in there, and you know, like I said, I'm very proud of that book.
How does he somebody like him in his position? There's many who've gone through it financially. How do they? What does he do to support himself? I mean, he's been on TV shows. I've seen him do.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not really sure because a number of years have gone by. I know that there was some property left in a in an estate. There's stuff like that exists. To what degree, I don't know. I think there's probably still some kind of royalty thing from other things he's done. There's nothing really from. Am I part of a cookie, by the way?
Oh, absolutely. Does he work steadily? You know, does he get gigs? Does he go out on tours? Does he do like
Not
the
to my knowledge.
package tours? Yeah.
Not to my knowledge. I mean, while we were writing the book, he would occasionally do a little set at the Whiskey a Go Go, play a couple of songs. But for Leif, what was always frustrating is him wanting to separate from the 1970 Leif Garrett. And society doesn't always let you do that. They want you to be that person. And to Leif's credit, artistically, I always thought it was cool that he wanted to do new things and try new things and explore new things. I think you're, as an artist, you're entitled to that. And
Yeah, he's a rocker. I mean, he's a rock and roll guy, right?
yeah, I mean, he and I grew up in very similar mindsets. We saw the same concerts, we listened to the same things. We were really tight. So, Yeah, he's rock and roll through and through, but he wasn't allowed to be that guy. They would when he, I mean, he would secretly mix in some Zeppelin songs when he would play back then, just to scratch that itch, you know.
I think they mentioned that in the VH1 special.
Yeah, he would do that, and that helped him cope. It was like a coping mechanism, you know. But look, being a teen idol is not easy. What you get put through, what the expectations are, and the lack of control. I'm sure for all of them back then, whether it was David Cassidy or Sean Cassidy or Leif, you know, it's hard. It's a really
And the shelf life, it's not long.
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years, that's it.
But you know what? What I learned, this is in the book, so I'm not speaking out of school. After the accident, he really couldn't do much here because the accident was very infamous and there was going to talks of a trial and all this. So, and at that point, he was kind of coming to the end. He's a couple of years in now. So his life cycle as a teen idol was sort of wrapping up. His management was very shrewd back then. They realized there were parts around the world, like in Far East Asia, that were a couple of years behind us culturally. And they thought, let's take him to Korea. Let's take him over there. And it's like they've never had him. And so they basically created a new career to keep the golden goose laying eggs for another year or two out of this country where the accident over there wasn't that big a deal, you know, and they got him in the magazines. And so for him, a lot of the things restarted over there.
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
Don't go away, gentlemen. We may need all of you.
Not too long ago, the news hit about the falling out between Hall and Oates over their song publishing. You co-authored John's memoir from 2017, Change of Seasons. How did he meet Daryl Hall? What was their relationship like through the years? Was there always tension between the two? Was that more recent?
They met in Philadelphia, both going to school. There was a battle of the bands, basically. And I think of not the Uptown Theater, another theater in Philly. Their bands are both going to play. They're backstage, shots ring out in the theater. And so John and Daryl's band gets pushed into a service elevator where they're going to escape. And they're face to face. And they're like, what the? And they start talking in the elevator. And they're like, well, we should hang out. And that's the spark of it. That's really where it starts. And then one of my favorite parts, a lot of these books for me, the most interesting parts are before the people are famous. Because once they're famous, you know a lot of that stuff. But there's a fascinating set of sequences in John's book. And John, I will tell you, of all the books I've done, I think John's is always going to be, in a way, is special on a big level. Because John, as a writer, we collaborated. We remain great friends. I am really fond of John Oates as an artist, as a writer, as a musician, everything. And, you know, we wrote very closely on this. But the other sequence in the book I was referencing was when John gets out of college in like 67 or so, he does what a lot of them do. He went to Europe and traipsed around for 3 months, right? He and Daryl are friends at that point, but that's it. They've not worked together. And Daryl gets his sister to rent John's apartment while he's gone. John says, hey, would Kathy sublet my place? Yeah, no problem. John comes back 3 months later. There's a padlock on his door. She didn't pay the rent. So John's been evicted and he's got nowhere to go. He walks down to Daryl's place and says, your sister kind of did me in here. And Daryl, who's got a little loft apartment, says, just stay here. That's what put them in the place to start making music.
Oh, my God.
Right? So
wow,
we would walk the streets of Philadelphia before the book came out, did a little video series like, okay, here's the apartment. If you don't get evicted from this place, maybe you don't get to this place. And we went to Daryl's place. And the fact they were forced to live together, that's where they start really collaborating. That's the spark I mean, the mailbox was Hall and Oates. So,
and when did things start to go wrong for them? Long into their career?
I don't know. I mean, look, I saw Hall and Oates play. If I saw them once, I saw them 60 times working on the book. I mean, again, they put on great shows, sold out every arena, every theater, whatever. It caught me off guard too. I mean, look, there's always artistic tensions that I think exist or disagreements, but I've seen that a million times.
Sure.
So what happened was nothing I was privy to. And I was, surprised like everybody was that happened.
Yeah, surprised for sure when he's on CBS, I think, doing the interview with CBS, just basically saying, people think that when you see these bands, they're all buddies and everybody's getting along. Yeah, he goes, we would, for the longest time, we'd show up at the gig in separate buses or planes or whatever,
Which
get
I
on
have to
stage,
tell
perform,
you,
and go home.
isn't a bad thing because I think once you understand the business of it and the dynamics, you don't have to be friends. You know what you're there for, whether it's Jagger and Rich, whomever, you know what the gig is. And what can help it keep it going sometimes is you don't get sick of each other. You're there to work. And I think you can look at it that way as well. One funny anecdote in the book is, they had a little stoop outside their apartment in Philly, this little place, and a girl walked by one day, and John starts chatting her up, and she's a flight attendant, and her name is Sarah, Sandy actually, but she also goes by Sarah. And John writes a song for an album called the album is Abandoned Luncheonette, and she says, "Well, I'm a flight attendant. I'm going to Las Vegas with a bunch of gamblers. They call it a Las Vegas turnaround. You just go and come back that night." And John says, "Wow, cool idea." He writes a song called Las Vegas Turnaround. I think he may see her for a little bit, but she ultimately goes with Daryl Hall. And Sarah Smile is written by her.
Wasn't that their breakthrough single?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, She's Gone. It started once Morris had a hit with She's Gone. It sort of put that back in and pushed it. But it's certainly Sarah, Rich Girl, though that 75, 76. Yeah, but yeah, Sarah Smile definitely was an explosive moment for them. But she being in their lives really affected their careers as well because her younger sister, Jana Allen, wrote Kiss on My List and Private Eyes. So these meetings you learn with these people is 1 second things happen and everything changes as a result.
So many hits, their songwriting process. Did he get into that a lot about that chemistry between the two, how they wrote songs together?
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing about them that I think really helped was you had a variety of scenarios. They would write together, they would write apart. Jana might have an idea. So you had a female point of view, you had collaborations, you had solo things. So if you listen to Hall & Oates hits, none of them really sound alike, which I think is interesting. If you look at She's Gone versus Sarah Smile versus Out of Touch, they all sound different. It isn't like a band where you can always tell it's them. You know what I mean? There's not like a signature sound. And I think that's because the inspirations were coming from so many different sources.
Def Leppard, one of my favorite bands. So let's get to Phil Collins' memoir, Adrenalize from 2015. He's the longtime lead guitarist for Def Leppard, but not an original member. And long before he joined the band, he was really roughing it out in pub bands. To talk about that and how he, along with Def Leppard, really had to struggle and fight their way to the top. Work ethic, huge with Def Leppard to this day.
Oh my God, that's the thing with them is that working class, we call it blue collar over here in this country. But yeah, Phil was in a very cool glam band called Girl before that, heavily into Bowie and glam rock, like Joe Elliott. And when Phil joins the band, I mean, they've had some success, but it's really, I think, Pyromania was obviously such a huge breakout record and Mutt Lange and everything. I mean, Phil's audition, I think, basically was the solo on, they played him Photograph. And he went home and came up with the solo, and they're like, yeah, he gets it. And yeah, having seen them and been with them a lot, their brotherhood is real. I mean, again, it's like they are as loyal to each other. I love watching them kind of communicate with each other. You see it when they play. They've got it all where everyone's got each other's back. Phil's is like a soccer team in a way. And they're always kind of, even when they're not together, there's a lot of communication. And I think they're a very unique band like that. I really do. In a day where so many bands fragment, badmouth each other, break up, whatever, Def Leppard, I don't think you ever have to worry about that. They're good friends, they respect each other. You look at what happened with Rick, because Phil would say to me, people always would say we didn't think you were going to keep your drummer after the accident that cost him his arm. And Phil said, it's so strange because it's the exact opposite. Our thing was, why would it cost us our drummer? He can still play, and he's our brother. We're going to figure this out. And they never thought for a minute that was it. It's not how they think.
It's so awesome. They were talking about that in the past, and I love that. And that is a story in itself. That is an inspirational story right there. The comeback of Rick Allen.
Unlike anything else. I mean, in rock and roll, it's hard to find a story like that. There really is, where that happened, and they rallied, and what Rick
he's
went
tapping
through.
he had like when you're in the hospital bed to keep you from sliding down, they have that foam thing at the bottom, and he's tapping that with his foot. His brother brought in a transistor radio for him to listen to tunes with.
Right.
And that's when the idea came to him.
Phil, they first visited him in the was he and Steve Clark. They didn't know how to prepare. And they said right away he started talking about how he was going to get back in and do this. And they thought he was delirious from medication. They didn't realize that was the plan. And when they did realize it, they were like, we're making this happen, And they're that band. It's such a testament to that kind of togetherness and just collective teamwork. I think I love them for that.
And Phil does all the licks, Steve Clark licks, on Adrenalized. When Steve Clark died, sadly, he died. He could not kick his drinking, and he died. And does Phil talk about that? That was a difficult thing for him, I'm sure.
Yeah. They were twins on the road doing that stuff. And when Phil saw the light and began to straighten out, he couldn't get through. And nobody could get through because it's hard when somebody doesn't want to do it, and it devastated him. I mean, there's a scene about him breaking down in the freeway after he's gotten to the studio to replace some parts, and Phil just breaks down crying behind his wheel. It all hits him that Steve's not going to be there anymore. And but again, they got through that. They got through it. They figured it out, and it's, again, they're just such a remarkable band.
I love them, and never gave up during the 90s. All the changes, the grunge era, all these things happened, and they could have. Joe Elliott said we could have. I think he said somebody mentioned to him once, hey, maybe if you just break up just so you can have a comeback tour, so you'll make more money or draw more attention because it's a comeback tour. He's like, no, we're just going to keep plugging away, and that paid off because now they're a huge draw.
And they never altered what they did. I mean, they stayed true to who they are.
Yeah, Slang was the only album where they kind of departed, but that
a little bit. But it's funny. I was playing Slang the other day. I think that record. I like that record.
There's some good stuff on there.
Really interesting record. And when they stayed at it, they hung in, and they were one of the first bands to really appreciate, I think, years later, the concept of co-headlining. Today it's like nothing, but their management to think, okay, if you took Journey and Def Leppard, I mean, that really changed the landscape for a lot of bands and bang for the fans' buck when you go out.
Allowed you to play in big venues still.
Yeah. They were one of the first bands to do that. So Def is like, I'm going to see them in a week and a half. So I had all these
cool,
nice summertime chance to see old friends play.
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
Short pause. Hold your breath for the dynamic duo.
Our guest is author, TV host, photographer Chris Epting. We haven't gotten to the TV and photography part yet. We're getting there, but let's go back to 2007. Your book, Led Zeppelin Crashed Here, The Rock and Roll Landmarks of North America. You take readers on a journey across North America to the exact locations where rock and roll history took place. Nearly 600 landmarks, and I'm hoping you can share a story or two, like the Bob Dylan motorcycle accident location or the Buddy Holly crash site. Did you go to these places?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the fun of writing a book like that, is really exploring, what's there. And I mean, recording studios, concert sites, death sites, accidents, everything. I think one of my favorites is a street in New York City, St. Mark's Place down in the East Village. And there's a big building there that the Rolling Stones, when they did their famous Waiting on a Friend video, where Mick is sitting there and Keith comes down the street and they connect. And you look at the building, and it's the exact same building that was on the cover of the Led Zeppelin album, Physical Graffiti. So here's a landmark that kind of lives in two different rock history moments, which I think is really cool. I located the exact site of the stage at Altamont. using aerial photography and all this to locate out on it's still an open field today by the racetrack, but I wanted to identify the exact spot where the stage had been. I went and found on the stage in Monterey, Northern California, where Jimi Hendrix kneeled and lit his guitar on fire. So I'm stepping into those kinds of places, and I did a lot of those. And
The Skinner plane crash site, did you go to?
yeah. Skinner, it's so funny. I had tickets to see them that year, at Madison Square
Really?
Garden. I still have my
Wow.
ticket to the show.
You
I
go to
love
places like that, like I mentioned, the Buddy Holly crash site. I mean, there's an eerie feeling that you must get when you're
the
there.
Buddy Holly one is actually amazing. Because it's still kind of the middle of nowhere, and fans have created kind of a little shrine to it,
And that's where again? That's in Minnesota or where?
It's in North Dakota.
North Dakota.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've
Yeah.
been to so many of these places.
Well, that's the fun of it. I mean, when you go into a recording studio, Sunset Sound in LA, and you think about the Stones doing Exile on Main Street, you think of Van Halen there, you think of the Doors there, little tiny, as big as this room, not big fancy studios, little kind of out of the way places. And you think about what happened in there, and you begin to reflect on what it was like when they were there, and what it sounded like, and what it felt like. And for me, that's really the exciting part, is stepping into those spaces and feeling that energy that is oftentimes left behind, and
That's what I say. You get that eerie feeling, like
Yeah.
you did. That's just one of the books that you've written on this. Before
I've
that
written a whole
was
series of those books.
whole series of them.
You find places sometimes. There's a place in downtown LA called the Morrison Hotel. It was an actual hotel,
Yeah.
and the doors, Henry Diltz photographed them. Famously, he wasn't allowed to, but they kind of got in and did the shot. The back cover of Morrison Hotel is the band at a little tavern that was called the Hard Rock Cafe a few blocks away. I think they walked to it. And it's funny, it's no longer there, but when the album came out, some British entrepreneur saw that, and Henry told me he called him and asked, does anybody own the name Hard Rock Cafe? They didn't, and that was the birth of the restaurant chain. But anyhow, I wanted to go find, again, for me, it's about going and finding location. And I go and I find what had been the Hard Rock Cafe. Today it's a store, but if you go in, it hasn't been gutted. Like the pillars, everything's original. And it's like almost a little, not a department, a little sundry store, it's a little food, little items and things like that. What was really cool about that, though, and I think this is in that book, is it's sort of like the Stones Zeppelin site in New York, where it has a dual function as a rock and roll landmark. Yes, the Doors are photographed there at the bar, but in the whenever Beat It came out, what were you talking about?
83.
83, the Beat It video, the billiard hall, that's what that was then. So you can line up the pillars of the little store, and that's where Michael Jackson did the Beat It video, and that's where the Doors hung out. So you've got this great cross, intertwining of rock and roll history right
I
there.
have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, James Dean died. Oh, but there are 4 altogether, right?
Yeah, they're like a series. James Dean died here, was the first one. Marilyn Monroe died here, which is Dyed. And each book has like 500 or 600 places. Elvis Presley passed here. It's not about where he died. It's where he played flag football in LA. And then I did one called It Happened Right Here, I think, which is a whole kind of all kinds of locations all over North America. So yeah, you mentioned TV show. There's a show called It Happened Here on the Reels channel. It was based on those books, really about tracing footsteps of pop culture events, which oftentimes involve rock and roll.
Well, there will be an easy way to find all this stuff. We can get to the links that people can go to afterwards. But the James Dean Died Here book, that, of course, there's rock and roll songs, classic songs like James Dean by the Eagles, and Don McLean references it in his classic American Pie. Tell us about the location. On that day that James Dean died, he was at a gas station. Wasn't there photos taken of him? He was getting gas.
Yeah, I retraced the whole day in the book. What happened was he was going up to Salinas in Northern California to race his new Porsche Spider. They were towing the car, which was new, on a trailer. They stopped for gas in Sherman Oaks, California, and his mechanic says, you know what? You haven't driven this thing much. Let's take it off the trailer, drive it up so you can get a feel for the car. You don't really know this car yet. This is the decision that ends his life. But several hours later, as they're up there, the mechanic is riding with Dean in the car. The other guys are in the truck that was driving the trailer hitch. And of course, in a little speck on the map called Shalom between Bakersfield and Paso Robles, Dean comes up out of kind of a hill, which you can't see. A big car is turning, they collide. Donald Turnipseed is the driver. Dean is not killed instantly. He dies. They believe, I interviewed the two cops who recovered his body before they passed
Oh,
away,
wow.
believe it or not. And they think he died. What's crazy is after they put him in the ambulance, that car had an accident on the way to the hospital. It drove off the road. And but they thought Dean might have still been alive then, but he died somewhere probably en route to there. And I just thought to call the book that because that represented all of those places that we pass by every day and you don't know what happened there. So the book is about lots of those places. And to me, James Dean died here. That's just sort of he's always going to be one of the great pop culture icons. And that book for me was a game changer. NPR made it like their book of the summer. It's weird, but like whenever it came out, 2001 or so, offbeat travel wasn't really yet a thing. That kind of road trip looking for movie locations and all that kind of thing. There wasn't a lot of it. And this book became kind of that. And it built an audience pretty quickly, and it allowed me to do sequels because clearly, the book did well enough and proved that people wanted those kinds of places, movie locations, crime scenes, accident sites, whatever, just to make sense. For me, it started as a kid in New York. I read an article about Marilyn Monroe's dress and the 7-year itch where it billowed up over the subway grating. And I didn't really know who she was, but it said that the subway grate was at the northwest corner of Lexington Avenue and 52nd Street. And the next time we were in the city, I dragged my parents over there just to find it. And I found it. And I thought, nobody knows this but me walking around that day. And that was the moment. That was the spark where I thought, there's got to be a lot of places that we walk over, but something happened there. And that literally, I was about 10 years old. I never got that out of my system. And from that point on, I was always, if something happened, I would think, where is that? How can I go find it? And that propelled me off into kind of where we are today.
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
The suspense is killing me.
The Marilyn Monroe died here, D-Y-E-D, is great. I love this story because this is where she dyed her hair blonde. You went to the location there on Hollywood Boulevard.
Which doesn't, some people might think it's frivolous, but when Norma Jean Baker becomes Marilyn Monroe and becomes a blonde, that does in a lot of ways change cultural history. All of a sudden this icon is born. So I don't take that lightly. I think those moments do matter, and again, I think it's a little coffee place today, same building. And I was in there, I think taping a little documentary or something and talking to one of the baristas is like, he was blown away. He loved Marilyn Monroe and he could not believe that had happened there. When people learn about these things, it redefines their feeling about it and it creates like an instant emotional connection.
6513 Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah.
Hey, did you do the Allman Brothers site where both Dwayne Allman and Barry Oakley, the bassist, 1 year later, same place?
I'm an Allman Brothers freak. So
same here.
When I selfishly love a band, I'll always kind of dig deeper. So yeah, I have the accident sites. I've got, of course, the house where they lived. I went to the grave of Elizabeth Reed. I went to the site of the wall where they shot the front cover of Live at the Fillmore East. So yes, absolutely. The Allman Brothers factor in a number of my books down in Macon primarily. And I've been there a number of times, in fact. I think they've done a really good job in the city of commemorating the Allman Brothers history there.
Love that band. Love that band. Another titled great band. Elvis Presley passed here, and this is, he passed the football there. He had touched football games with other celebrities. This is where? What was the park?
It's called Deneve Park. It's off of Beverly Glen near Sunset. Right in a really nice area, a little small park. You would play Ricky Nelson's. And I just helped out with a book with Gunnar and Matthew Nelson, Ricky's sons, that comes out later this year. And they knew about that, would tell me little stories about Elvis and all that with their dad. So that was always kind of fun to kind of get their take on it.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I love Elvis too. There are great Elvis sites, of course, all over the place. And in that book, there's a whole chapter just on Elvis locations.
The book on Jimi Hendrix. This is one Hendrix fans should get if they haven't got it yet. It's from 2023. It's called Jimmy and Me, The Experience of a Lifetime. A young screenwriter named Jonathan Stathakis, with just one movie credit to his name, is invited to collaborate with Jimmy on a film, and then it leads to one of the craziest trips in music history. Any stories you can share from this? How did this guy meet Jimmy?
He was a college kid in the late 60s who, like a lot of college kids, would make a little experimental film. And he forgot about this movie. He was like in college and he kind of wrote it. It was like a nothing movie. He gets a call one day. He's back living in his parents' house in like 68. And he's summoned to Midtown Manhattan for a meeting. They don't say why. Bring him in. Our client saw your film. And he first said, film, you know? And then he remembers, that thing yeah. What happened was it ran for either 1 or 2 days in London. Whoever had financed this little film, if it ran someplace, I guess you could recoup some of the money. You had to get it shown somewhere once. On that day, Jimi Hendrix happened to be in the theater and he fell in love and he noted who the quote writer was. Jonathan's like, I don't even remember what I wrote, but they bring Hendrix into the room and he says, I love your film, man. And Jonathan, who's a Hendrix fan, is like, really? And he says, I want to do a film with you. I want to collaborate with you. And they do. But what happens is that, Hendrix at that point, his time is kind of weird. So he can't find a ton of time to collaborate. So Jonathan just gets swept up in the storm at that time. So there are really cool stories. If I can share a quick one that's non-musical related, but
sure,
so crazy. Jimmy is up in Woodstock, New York, I think he's getting ready for the festival, which is going to be about 30 miles away in Bethel. And Jonathan's up there. And Jonathan has a friend who lives locally in Woodstock. He's a beekeeper. And he gets called. Jonathan's with Hendrix. And Jimmy says, where are you going? Well, my beekeeper friend, he's got an emergency. Jonathan goes and meets him, the beekeeper friend, who's got a truck. And he says, listen, my girlfriend and I, we're moving our beekeeping thing up north, like I think to Washington State. We can't sell enough candles here. It's just not working. Can you lend us some money, like some seed money? And Jonathan's like, do I go ask Hendrix? And he says, how much do you need? He says, about $2,000. That's all Jonathan has, which he has made. He's a photographer too. He has sold a few Hendrix pictures already. Jonathan's like, and the guy says, look, I'll pay you back double if we want to make the money back, and we'll make it back. Jonathan gives him the money. They load all the bees up. Jonathan gets stung. Hendrix says to him, what the hell happened here? I got friend with Hendrix rolling his eyes like, dude, you're never going to see that money again. He doesn't see the money again. But the friend moves up north, and after a couple of years, the candle thing doesn't really happen. But his girlfriend's like, we got to shift gears here. We got all these freaking bees. She reads a 17th century book about the medicinal properties of beeswax. And she's like, you know what? Let's make something non-candle. Let's think of some products that would harness this supposed health benefit. His friend's name was Bert.
No way.
And Bert's bees, yeah, that's the guy.
I use that stuff every day.
that's the company.
Burt's Bees.
Yeah. So that's again, that's a little weird story in the book, but it's still. At first, I thought we put that in there. That's too good. You have to find a way to make sense of it. And the fact that Hendrix was like commenting on those things, like, okay, that's cool. That gets it in because Hendrix acknowledged
right.
the effect of the bees.
That is so wild. All right, let's talk about the TV series It Happened Here. How did that all come about? What was the show about? Maybe share some
10 episodes we did. I think they're on demand on the Reels channel. It's just, I had been approached by a production company about adapting those books, of retracing footsteps of famous places related to people, because I was doing that anyway. So, hey, let's take Janis Joplin. I'll go to the bar where she has her last drink. I'll go lay on the bed where she died, all that kind of thing. And that's what we did. So John Lennon, Marvin Gaye, Kurt Cobain, Janis. I'm very proud of the series. It got really good response, and it's me and other guests related to the subject. I'm kind of the storyteller that threads the narrative, but then we'll have like Marvin Gaye's sister giving her take, Richard Pryor's son, all that sort of thing. And but it was a really fun show to do. I like televised storytelling like that. I like being out on location.
How long did it last? How many seasons?
It was one season, 10 episodes. We talk about maybe another one. COVID kind of got in the way of another one. Like we did a lot of different projects, but we were talking, in fact, the production company and I have been talking about something similar to that, like an updated version of it.
That would be great. The Booked on Rock podcast will be back after this.
Pull out your pants pockets. All kids of the future wear their pants inside out.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. There's a section on your website features your photography, so let's talk about that. Some beautiful photos that I want to ask you about. But first, how did you get into photography?
Always been a hobby. Since I was a kid, I liked nature photography, but the more music journalism I started doing, I would ask the subject if I could photograph them in portrait for the story, but also to give me a deeper sense of what they were about. We could almost a little photography session. And at first, not everyone agreed to it, but once they started doing it and saw that it actually enhanced the story, I would shoot everybody like that, and it became a real fun part of any journalistic project. And, I remember like Steven Tyler, for example, where I would shoot him. Let me see. He looked at, oh, okay, well, let me do that. And he started shaping the process just by looking at what, which was cool. And oftentimes this would be after I had spent a little time with them. So some trust had been developed where I don't go in like interviewing. I would try and have conversations. And if that felt good, then they would, I think, give you a little bit more as a visual subject, and I was always fortunate. I always consider myself fortunate to do that. And it made for some fun pictures too.
And it turns out you took a picture of Ozzy Osbourne recently, and we've obviously lost Ozzy. It's a great loss. You took a photo of him. I think it's dated 2025.
I think it's a little older than that.
It's a little older than that. What's the story behind this?
Not that long ago. And it was like, it's like a non-Ozzy photo. I don't know if you have it up. I can post it, but yeah, it's a very pensive, because he was talking about this. Something had happened that particular day. Some news had come out that was unfavorable in a certain degree to his livelihood and some things related to a tour he was announcing. And you see it, I think, in his face. It's a very serious, pensive kind of look, but I think it also presents a very sensitive part of him that was there. I think Ozzy was a far more complex artist than he gets credit for. I think he understood who he was. I don't think he was a caricature. I think he took himself more seriously than he let on. And I think he worked really hard at what he did. I think his relatability to people, it's kind of like Def Leppard in a way, that workman-like, working class, get it done thing. I think Ozzy was sort of the first of that, And,
you're preaching to the choir with Ozzy and Def Leppard too, but Ozzy to me was just brilliant, and the body of work is absolutely phenomenal from Sabbath to solo. Yeah, I'm sorry, it was 2015. It says here, not 2025.
I think it's earlier than, I think it's later than that actually.
Okay.
That's been dated, and I've shot him numerous times too. Once we did it once, and Sharon liked it, then you're in. Then she said, "Oh, shoot Oz." I did it a number of times, and same thing with Aerosmith and Gene Simmons. Lou Reed, which am a huge Lou Reed fan, and that was difficult and challenging, but totally worth it, because he didn't like having his picture taken, evidently.
I can imagine, yeah. Was it Gene Simmons with makeup, without makeup?
Without. Well, I've done both, but it was without, and I'm super proud of those. I'm a big Kiss fan.
Same
as
here.
well. And I mean, I appreciate and respect Kiss. And so yeah, I like that. And when I write a book with somebody, I like to shoot them, and like to get that going. So I've shot John. Anybody I've worked with, I like to photograph just for my own portfolio, or just kind of give them something back that they may like.
Beautiful stuff, like the coyote in Death Valley.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I love nature photography, and I shoot a lot of birds. That's really my favorite aspect of nature is bird life. So I still shoot a lot of those.
Well, people can see all of them at chrisepting.com.
And I was happy my son at that time, who was in college, he took up photography, and then he would come shoot all the shows I covered. And so he and I had a great time seeing dozens, if not hundreds of bands, and he shot everybody. I mean, just from the biggest to the smallest, from punk stuff on the Warped Tour up to Kiss and Def Leppard at the Forum. He was always in the thick of it, which is really cool to watch him kind of chase his own dream there through college.
The Booked on Rock podcast will be back after this.
Think about the future.
Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. All right, let's finish with, and I asked you through email if it's okay to talk about, because I don't know how many people know about this project, but current projects you're working on, a Paul Rodgers book. Oh my God. Okay. Paul Rodgers, a guy who deserves a book. Tell us about this. When is it coming out? When's it due out? What's it going to be?
He talked about us publicly, so I feel comfortable.
Okay, good.
For a while, we were super quiet, but he talked about us when he was on Eddie Trunk, and I met Paul. I interviewed him years ago, and I wasn't sure he remembered that, but about a year or so ago, somebody representing him contacted me, somebody I'd worked with, and said, Paul needs a book. He's never really wanted to do it, but would you at least talk to him about it? And I said, you don't have to ask twice. I mean, Paul Rodgers to me is, if any rock royalty truly exists, and he would hate me saying this because he's very humble and very modest, but come on, if you grew up when we grew up, Bad Company, and especially Free, for me, I was love Free.
Oh, Free,
everything else,
Bad Company, The Firm, the work he did with The Firm,
everything.
Solo work. The guy's voice is velvet, legendary voice.
And so we had a Zoom call, and I could tell he didn't want to do a book. And we talked about it and joked a little bit. And I think he realized that the process could actually be fun, and it could be wistful and a little nostalgic. And he'd been through so many health things. I think that shifted his perspective as well, because all of a sudden now no one's guaranteed anything. And I think
how is he doing, by the way? He had a heart condition.
He's doing great. He had a number of strokes and heart things. He's done great. We've been working on this for a year. Our hope is that it's out next year. A lot of work's been done on it. I've done a ton of interviews for it. Paul and I have had dozens and dozens of sessions where he has shared wonderful stories from growing up through his entire career, from again, the early days into Free, into Bad Company, everything after that. So I think we have photos that are absolutely incredible, and most people haven't seen. This book is going to be really special. This was all culminating around the fact that Bad Company finally got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Ceremony will be this fall, which is really exciting and a good thing for the book. And I'm so excited. I think Paul is really, he's one of the most graceful rock stars you'll ever meet, because he really is modest, and he really is, he doesn't carry himself in a way that some people do at that level. His humble nature, I think, belies the ferocity of what he brought us, the soulfulness, the blues-based, unmatchable passion that he brought to those hits and deep cuts and everything. So solid, an amazing guitar player, which people don't know a lot about. Really.
I saw Bad Company with Leonard Skinner maybe 10, 15 years ago up in the site of Woodstock there, Bethel, New York.
Yeah.
When they broke into Seagull, I mean, the goosebumps. I mean, just goosebumps listening to him sing that song. That is my favorite deep track of his from Bad Company.
There's a new tribute record. It comes out this fall. It's announced, where a bunch of artists have done Bad Company songs, and Joe Elliott and Phil Collen do Seagull. So you'll love that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I cannot wait to have you on to talk about the book when it's out.
I can't wait. I like I said, I am so excited. With Paul, it's like when you realize who you're talking to and his seriousness to the that's the other thing too, the way he embraced the project and the seriousness with which he takes it.
Yeah.
His wife Cynthia has been a remarkable help. Longtime manager David Spiro. The four of us are kind of like this team. And what we've been working on the last year, I can't wait for the world to experience it. I think it's going to be I know it's going to be a really special project, and we'll talk about it once it's out for sure.
Can you say who the publisher is?
No, that's still being discussed and arranged. So that'll be out sooner than later.
Does he think he can go out and perform again, or is that pretty much?
I don't know. I mean, I think he could, but I think part of him likes his life now. I think he lives in a couple of beautiful places. I think when you come out of what he did from a health standpoint, I mean, he's fine. But I think he feels like, we don't know what we have left. I live in these beautiful places with my amazing wife. Let's enjoy this. You know what I mean? They've got
good for him.
They've got their life, and to unplug that and go on the road. I mean, it's cool, but it's really disruptive too.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for him. If he's happy, man, that's all.
That's where the Doobies kind of blow me away. Everyone's in their mid to late 70s. The Doobies, I don't know what they feel like after. You would think they're in their 30s. It's
right.
It's weird, but Paul can do it. My favorite part of our conversation sessions are when he breaks into song, because he'll be talking and saying, when I did this, and then he'll just start singing "Feel Like Making Love" or
man,
singing, and you sit there, we all look at each other like, really? And he does that to sort of show you what he was doing, what he was thinking.
Yeah. Does he tell you about when they recorded that first album there at the castle there, and he's singing Headley Grange, and he's out under the moonlight with the microphone out?
The song "Bad Company."
He's singing the song "Bad Company" out there. They set up the equipment outside.
Ron Nevison, took him up on a hill under a full moon, and
again, goosebumps. I could see. Look at the hair raised.
Imagine
on my
that,
arms.
like that lone voice. That's a great story in the book. But there's a ton of great stories. You'll learn all about Paul Kossoff and Peter Grant and all these other supporting players in Paul's life throughout the years. And I've spoken to so many people. You'll be super surprised. I can't let on to the other voices in the book, but it's a very impressive group of people that really want to talk about Paul.
All right.
And their stories about him.
Quite a teaser. Maybe 2026. We're going to say that.
I think so. Yeah. Okay. I'm very confident. And again, I so applaud what you do, Eric. I seriously.
Oh, thanks, Chris.
Of all there's a million podcasts and a million things to listen to, but your content, what you focus on, the way you give authors voice and the way you share stories yourself, it's really wonderful. So thanks for what you do. Seriously, I'm sure every one of your guests feels the same way, that we're deeply grateful for the energy you put into this.
Thanks so much. You don't know who's listening. You don't know who's watching. And you sent me an email out of nowhere. I was like, are you kidding me?
I was listening to your podcast. I'm listening recently, and I'm like, okay, great episode. Then I'm like, he and I should be talking.
Hell yeah.
And you answered right back, and it was like, great. And here we are. So
you got to get your own podcast, man. You got to.
I would love to continue our conversation, because again, you're a great guy to talk to about it. You're so knowledgeable, and I think you provide a really great service.
I appreciate it. You got to get your own podcast. You got a zillion stories.
Someday, but you know what? I'm going to give them to you for now.
That's right. Give them all to me.
Share some things for you when it comes to rock and roll stuff, but again, it's really fun. And as I knew it was going to fly by, it's like I feel like we just started talking.
Yes, absolutely. Well, let's talk about now where people can find out more about you. Probably the best thing is to just go to your website, because it's got links to everything, all your books.
Yeah, chrisepting.com. I have an Amazon authors page that has every book, and I've written, again, if you just search my name, I've written so many articles about music. Those will pop up on a whole variety of places I've written for over the years. Huffington Post, I wrote for, did music writing for
NPR.
Yeah, every place. LA Times.
LA Times.
lot of stuff out there.
Yep. Yeah. ChrisEpting.com. I'll put the link up in the show notes as well, so people can go right there. So, Chris, thanks so much, man. This is awesome.
Eric, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Well, now, that was an adventure.
That was quite a show you put on today.
Well, let me just close this conversation by saying you are one unique individual.